Hello again, everyone. Welcome back to Best Darn Everything, where we like to think of it as like a little treasure that you found in between Simpsons episodes, which is what we're going to be talking about today, treasure hunting. And joining me, of course, on this journey into the supernatural world of I don't know. We're talking about Uncharted. That's what we're doing. And joining me, as always, your co-host with the most and the birthday boy today, Richie the Whiz Kid. How you doing today, Rich? Happy birthday.
Thank you. It's a weird tangent to go off on to bring up supernatural, because if I recall, all of these supernatural elements in Uncharted are actually rooted in history, with therefore making them historically accurate and not supernatural whatsoever. So
like zombie Nazis?
Exactly. But they were more like the Resident Evil lickers than I would say zombie Nazis. But yeah, I'm excited to talk about this today, man. Thank you for the birthday wish. I know this will be out weeks later, so next year, everybody remember February 23rd. Send all your gifts that way. But yeah, we got a movie to talk about. We got games to talk about. I mean, we haven't read any of the comics that I assume exist about it, so we can't talk about those. But, I just gave them a shout out. So there you go. Let me throw it back to you, the man, the myth, the Sully to my Drake. It is Miles.
I don't know, man. I cannot grow a mustache to save my life. I will admit that in full right now. But we are talking about Uncharted today, which is the video game series, now movie franchise, most likely. First of all, we just saw the movie yesterday. But we started playing the games back when they first came out. What year was that they first came out? We should have had that available.
Maybe like 2009. I could be way off. Uncharted 1 release date.
2007 is when
I was
that
close.
came out. You were pretty close, honestly. Yeah, it was a game by Naughty Dog, who had made games like Sly Cooper and I believe Ratchet and Clank. Is that right? Or am I making that last one up?
I think they were part of Ratchet and Clank, if I remember.
I know for sure Sly Cooper. But Uncharted was a game, Richie, that I believe that you played before I did. I believe you were the one that recommended it to me, because that's how most of the games I play end up happening, frankly. But the first one back in 2007, it's a game that as soon as we both played it on a single player campaign, like way, we felt about Assassin. We played kind of rare to think about. It's kind of funny thinking back on like what that franchise became to where it started. But do you remember your first thoughts of the franchise? Do you remember your first thoughts after playing the first game, Drake's Fortune?
Uncharted was the third game I think I played on PS3. My dad bought a PS3 because they were like $400 or $500, and at the time, Blu-ray players had just released, and they were $1,000. So my dad was like, "Why wouldn't I get the video game system? So if my son's ever over, he's got something to do." But like, he literally bought it for a Blu-ray player, and I mean, it was a smart decision, honestly. At the time, it was half price. And when my car broke down one week, I was staying with him, and I beat Assassin's Creed. I'd played Resistance: Fall of Man up in college with you because our roommates had that Resistance game next door on the big projector. So I played that a little bit more. And then I ended up playing
I don't think
Uncharted.
I ever played that one. I'm trying to think if I did or not.
If you saw clips from me, you might remember our neighbors playing it when we'd go over there when it first came out. But the third game I played was Uncharted because Blockbuster was right down the street. It was before I'd been back working there. And I picked up Uncharted and started playing it. And it was just, there was something about it, man. It was a lot of fun. I was like, yeah, I guess it's kind of like Tomb Raider, but like I like this Nathan Drake guy. Like he's really funny. And whereas Tomb Raider, Lara Croft is always like precise and angry all the time and sharp to the point, all that stuff. Drake was just kind of fumbling his way around, and he seemed like more of a regular guy where it's just like, well, yeah, I can jump super far, but like I'm gonna say something stupid and laugh all the time, and it just kind of connected with you.
Yeah, I really don't remember playing the first game much at all. If I do remember the feeling I had of it, like, you know, I remember really loving it to the point that
it was beautiful.
the first game I played was Assassin's Creed on the PS3, and I remember for weeks after that, we talked about this recently, but for weeks after that, like everywhere I looked, all I saw was like ways I could climb things. And I think Uncharted really built on that. Like on one way, I was thinking, I remember when you recommended to me, it's like I just played an adventure game where like you climb a bunch of shit. Like I don't really want to do that, but it's so much different because this one really does kind of fall into its trope of like everybody says it's like Indiana Jones meets Tomb Raider. But Indiana Jones and Tomb Raider are dope as fuck. So like that's kind of like, a good thing. That's kind of like the whole like, people complain about fan service and it's like I'm a fan and I like to be serviced. I'm cool with it. But
it's kind of like it takes the movie magic of Indiana Jones and the game magic of Tomb Raider, combines them.
Like I would agree with that. Yeah.
It's very much a cinematic game, I feel like, which usually would rub Miles the wrong way because Miles doesn't like it when people are talking. But Uncharted is voice acted so well, I feel like, that you feel like you're watching a movie at times. And again, the first game was so beautiful. I'd find myself standing on top of rocks at certain points and painting the camera around just to look at all the scenery, because at the time I'd never seen a game besides Assassin's Creed look like that.
You are 100% right about me I'm so impatient when it comes to video games, and I love video games, but like if I'm in the mood to watch a movie, I'll watch a movie. If I'm in the mood to play a game, I want to be making things happen myself. So like if I'm not actively doing something, I get bored really fast, and usually I'm like I'd rather just be watching, whatever show I'm watching on Netflix right now or whatever the case may be. But this was the first game franchise that I really do like. I think I was like hooked to the screen like every single second. Even I find myself like on replays of that game, I would still not skip a lot of cutscenes just because it was such an interesting story. Is it Nolan North is the voice actor that does Drake? Fantastic. Like so good. Just the way he's able to do the sarcastic, unlucky is another word I'd use to describe him. But also like, it's like almost like he's small scale unlucky, big scale lucky as hell. Cause like, it's like, as he's doing these various things, shit always goes completely wrong, but he always skates out of it somehow, some way.
But the thing you learn throughout the course of 4 games too is that like when he starts sliding down a rock somewhere because something broke, you start eyeballing everything around you. Like you're Drake going, what am I going to jump onto at the last second here? Like I know.
Yeah, and the way that they would do it, like with both the voice acting and the music, would be so great because like in my head right now I can hear is like you're like the hanging on like
crap,
no yeah exactly yeah that's exactly what I was going to say. So and back to the whole like cinematic aspect again, that does usually annoy me, and I really do like this one. But there is this fantastic marketing campaign. I want to say it was for Uncharted 2, which is I believe arguably both of our favorite of the franchise. We'll talk about that later. But Uncharted 2 had this wonderful ad campaign where this guy would basically be playing Uncharted, and like his girlfriend or wife would get home or whatever, and like he basically would convince her that it was like a movie or a TV show. And like, it got to the point where like at the end she comes up and she's like, hey hun, can we watch some more of that movie you had on the other night? And he's like, okay. And he's like secretly controlling it. I do think that game to some extent felt like more like you were controlling like a character in a movie more than most games do.
I remember that ad, but I remember another ad even more. And it's because by the time the second one came out, I was working at Blockbuster, and it was one of the ads that played on our TV screen. So I was seeing it like every 2 hours or so it would pop up. But it was like a full cinematic trailer, like everything. It showed a lot of scenes from the game, and I was like, at first I was gonna be like, yeah, I'll play it eventually. Like I like the first one, I'll play the second one. But I kept seeing the ads so much, like I was going, man, I really want to freaking play this game. And when I finally got Uncharted 2 and I rented it when I got off work one night, and by like 7 a.m, I'd almost beaten it in one night. I literally stopped playing because I saw the progress on the pause screen. I was like around 80%, 83% complete with the game. And I was like, I got to save more for tomorrow. That's literally, I made myself quit playing because I was like, I want to save more of the game for tomorrow. I didn't want it to end with Uncharted 2.
You didn't want to accidentally burn through all of it, which is, it's not because that game's so short. It's a very fair amount of game. It's a game that like you feel like you've accomplished something, you completed. dragging on and on. And there's something to that too, where it's not a true open world experience. There is a linear path,
right?
That you
it is
follow,
linear,
but you feel like you're always in control of like where you're going for some reason.
Yeah.
Like they do a really good job of forcing that, even on some of the more open elements. Like I don't remember which game. I want to say it was 4 actually, but I could be misremembering. But like even places where you're like swimming in open ocean, where like you're like, or like a boat wreck or whatever. Like it always feels like you're in control and could go anywhere, but you obviously need to go to this, specific area.
Dude, and each game gets more and more beautiful, and they try to work with different elements. Because like in Uncharted 3, you're in the open ocean, and they deal with like that boat sinking at one part, and they're dealing with water.
That's what I'm thinking of. Yeah.
And then in Uncharted 4, you're out in like sandy areas or jungle areas, and you're seeing all these other elements. And even the Lost Legacy with Chloe and Nadine, it's a little more of the open world at parts of it as well, which I enjoyed. Like even that game was a ton of fun as well, and I was so worried with it not having Drake in it, but like Chloe,
I do feel like that game was lacking, like not having Drake. Like I remember not wanting to stick around as much for like some of it, but I agree it held on considerably well. I would rate it the worst in the series, but also still like that doesn't mean it's bad type of thing.
Right, the worst Simpsons episode's better than the best episodes of other TV shows, so.
A lot of times that's accurate. Another thing that part 2 introduced, other than having that like really amazing set piece where you start out on the train and whatnot, which becomes kind of the like memorable, that bookends the whole story. So it's a really fun experience in that way. But it also introduced multiplayer, which became a huge part of the Uncharted franchise. It became probably our favorite part to some extent, at least at times. And it kind of just changed like what it would become like the reason to buy the game type of thing as well. Even at one point released the multiplayer alone, I want to say by the time they got to the 3rd or the 4th one. But part 2, there was a very rudimentary, much more simplified than it is now version of the multiplayer, and it had a really shoddy online system. I remember it was constantly like you got, I think, disconnected from almost as many matches as you got connected to it. But like it's one of those things that's almost like the first Halo, where like if you go back and play the first Halo's multiplayer now, it's very dated, but like it obviously birthed like a whole movement of online gaming. But where multiplayer, I think, overtook the franchise was in part 3. It's almost like part 1, there's only the solo. Part 2 introduced the multiplayer, but it was still very much about the single player campaign. Part 3, it was almost 50-50. And I think by part 4, you could argue that they were selling it on the multiplayer even more than the story to some extent. But part 3 is always going to be a personal favorite for me. It's going to stick out in terms of like how much enjoyment I got out of that game. Was absolutely part 3 over part 2, even though I think part 2 had the better story. And that's because they had the multiplayer that really took a lot of unique steps, including being one of the early adopters of having an early access to a multiplayer with an ad campaign or a brand campaign, because we got to have early access to Uncharted 3 multiplayer because we went and got a code off of a Subway sandwich, or I think you had to get a large drink.
It was a drink, yeah.
Yeah. Which was just why I think I saw a commercial and I like immediately called you and it was like, holy shit, dude, we gotta, or it was maybe you saw the commercial.
It started that they were going to do that. But then when I was going to a Walmart one night, I was by a Subway and I saw that they were out and I called you and I was like, dude, the cups are out right now. And I think you and your wife went to go to Subway real quick. And I don't even remember if I
had just gotten off of a double. I'd gotten off of a 12-hour shift at a fucking mall. And I was like almost to the point where I was like, yeah, I'm not even in the mood to game tonight. I'm just going to watch a movie. And then you're like, hey, this Uncharted's out. And I'm like, well, I'll sleep at some point tomorrow.
Sleep for tomorrow. But I don't
and at that time,
I got
think
a
you only had
sandwich.
two. I don't think I did. I literally just got a drink, which is like the only time I've ever done that at a Subway. But I remember that first there's only like 2 maps. And it was so buggy. It was Chateau and I don't even remember what the other one was.
Chateau's the only one I remember.
They may have been the only one.
There were 2 maps. I just don't remember what the other one was.
Yeah. But of course, because we had the subway code, it introduced the greatest taunt of all time that you could ever do, the $5 footlong. I'm on camera, the $5 footlong from Nathan Drake, which like all of that sounds terrible. Like that sounds like it's like, oh my God, this corporate branding in a video game, but they handled it wonderfully.
It works so well though. You
Yeah.
can unlock a Subway hat and a Subway shirt. Like that is genius marketing by Subway. Because it's like we're literally putting ads for people to see inside video games. And usually it's like, we reviewed No Malone recently on another podcast.
Camp/Horrorcast, which you can check out on Mondays live on Twitch.
And they had to change the name of Modelo in the movie to make it Model 8.
So like, and they just did it with a Sharpie for what it's worth.
Yeah, and it kind of takes you out of the world when you see stuff like that. But like seeing Subway actually exist within that universe, there was something really like you felt like wrong, but in the best way possible on that. And yeah, we played the hell out of that beta.
Bringing it full circle, we'll eventually get to the movie too, and they do the same thing with Papa John's. I think they do that in a really fun way. But I want to talk about this beta. I want to talk about this multiplayer. We played that beta. I think we were already max level, like when the game start, like what it would let you get during the beta.
They capped you at like level 35, I believe.
Something like that, yeah. But like we pretty quickly got that, and we're like waiting for the game to release so we could keep leveling up and unlocking, outfits and bonuses and whatnot. That it wasn't introduced in part 3, but it was definitely, I would say, if not perfected, improved upon greatly. There was so much cool ways you could kill people other than just shooting them. Because there's so many shooters out there, third person, first person, there's tons available. So you have to do something that can set yourself apart from other games. This game had a cover system that I understand was really similar to the Gears of War series. I didn't play that, but I understand that worked. But where I think this game really excelled was the being able to sneak up and assassinate people by sneaking up from behind.
My favorite way to kill people in that game.
And then my favorite way to kill people in that game is climbing up and pulling them off of a ledge, which was like a timing thing that was always so fucking satisfying when you got it right.
Because on the other side you could kick people off of a ledge if you saw them. So there was always this race
defensive.
To see.
Right, it was a timing, like you had to almost like a chess match of like you had to wait till the other person wasn't looking type of thing.
Oh, there were so many times where you would like jump over on a ledge and see somebody up there, and you just wait for a second, and hopefully your gun wouldn't be sticking up over the side, and they'd run over to the ledge, and then you just grab them and pull them off. That was very satisfying. Very satisfying.
Agreed. That introduced systems with like perks, like you always had your classes set up so that you could
I was silent
up on people easier. I don't remember really exactly what I used, but I remember my favorite thing about Uncharted
hip fire accuracy, baby.
Hip fire, dude. I that's literally what I was just about to talk about. I think our team dynamic worked so well because you would basically sneak around the outside and use long distance weapons, and I would just be like bull in a China shot mode, running full speed through gunfights with hip fire on, and I would piss people off so much just like running around shooting like they need to turn down the hip fire accuracy on this game, and I'm like, you just got to get better at it, son. But
I think that's one of the reasons we enjoyed that online game so much, because there's games like Call of Duty where you're like, oh, what's my kill death? I wanted to be above 1 just so I'm a halfway decent player. And there was something about Uncharted where like you still cared about that stuff, but it's almost like it felt more effortless to achieve that stuff. And like you could focus on the way you were killing people or doing other things. And it felt like you were in your element. I'm talking about
there was all those like various awards you could get for doing cool things. I mean, everybody's got the triple kills and stuff like that, but there's also like all sorts of cool streak bonuses you could get. And the other thing, there's one big negative I want to save here to talk about before we move on, but let's switch for a second. The other thing that they added to the multiplayer that was arguably just as good, or we spent just as much time on as the like competitive multiplayer, the cooperative multiplayer took like a whole new step into the third game, because it like almost created an extra game that you got to experience when you played with a second person. They took characters from the story game, and you'd go on these essentially side quests that could only be achieved with another player. And like, they were both a fun story to experience, but then they would have these extra challenges where it's like, you're trying to get like a platinum medal on it by beating it in a certain amount of time, or, all these great things that they added that in some ways, it reminds me of Ghost of Tsushima, the way that we are experiencing, like the way that they would add those like extra medals and stuff if you get it done in a certain amount of time. I feel like that game had an earlier version of that, Uncharted 3.
But it was 3 players.
That's right.
It was really hard to do with 2 players.
2. That's right.
And we got so good at it at one point, we couldn't quite get the like by ourselves. We couldn't quite get the top tier where you get that little emblem on your player player icon. But I remember I was still friends with the guy on the PlayStation Network, so I'll give him a shout out. I believe it was Nakeface.
Oh my God, Nakeface!
He helped us get all of those awards for the last few missions that we were having trouble with. But like you had to have like perfect playthrough on the hardest difficulty.
You had to have the game memorized. We literally had to like call out like where it'd be like at certain parts of the map. We knew one of us would have to go one way. It was like literally choreographing the entire level. It was that intense.
But when we got those little emblems, I felt so satisfied.
I felt like such a
we've
badass,
arrived,
dude. Honestly, I was low key sad like when Uncharted 3 died down and got replaced by Uncharted 4 because I never loved the multiplayer in 4 as much as I love the multiplayer in 3.
I miss like the grappling hook is a very fun addition for Uncharted 4, but I feel like I like sneaking up on people and taking them out. And with the grappling hook, that's how you assassinate people in that game. But you can do it you just have to hit them one time with it. And it's like, it's not quite the same. I still really enjoyed Uncharted 4's multiplayer.
Agreed.
I felt like I was pretty good at it still. But it was that feeling of 3 is now a nostalgia for me.
Mm-hmm. Three is the apex of multiplayer gaming. Maybe that or Halo 2 would be like one of the ones that would make it for my list for sure. But
GoldenEye's up there still.
See, I like GoldenEye, but I never actually owned a 64, so I always just played GoldenEye at a friend's house, and I think that's why it never, got quite as much into my heart, I guess, whatever you'd say. One major thing that I think was the greatest idea, one of the things I was most excited about, and when it worked, was one of the coolest additions to the Uncharted online play ever. But unfortunately,
any online gameplay ever.
Agreed. But unfortunately, it was also one of the most broken systems in any video game that I've ever experienced, except for maybe like Cyberpunk 77 or Friday the 13th when it first came out. But regardless, it was the cinematic starts to the multiplayer matches. So basically, if you were playing on the airport level, there, instead of just starting, one team starts on one side, the other team starts on the other, you would actually start in this unbalanced like mini fight, basically, where one team would start on an airplane, the other team would start on jeeps surrounding the airplane, and you would be doing like a battle,
and it's all moving advantage. Like it's not
nothing is
unless
static,
it's buggy. Unless it's buggy, then sometimes
it would freeze. But like basically the idea was the plane was supposed to be taking off and these jeeps were supposed to be stopping it from taking off, and it always ended the same way, that the plane would not take off because that's how the level is built. But you would have the opportunity to, as either the bad guys or the good guys, gain like an advantage by winning out on that earlier spot. And it made it really, really fun when it worked, and it just made it something different. And there's also a train version where there was like the train underground station where you both teams started on a moving train. But you could get out and run across the top of the train. You could get in the train. You could be on the side of the train. Again, very dynamic idea. And since the train's moving, like the angles of fire would not always be consistent. Again, such a great idea. And one of my favorite memories of that game is when we would play those and have just like an incredible round overtaking the plane or something like that. But unfortunately, it was always buggy, and it seemed that at first they were really making efforts to fix it because they would like disappear for a couple days and then come back, and then they disappear for a couple days and come back. But as time went on, it became more and more clear that they were just giving up on that idea because it just eventually went away and never came back.
We've got PS5s now. We've got 4K technology.
I mean, we don't personally, but as a society, we do.
Yeah, I'm just saying in the world.
You might by the time they hear this podcast.
I feel like they could try it again right now. Like, even if it's a game simply just doing that stuff, or even if it's like a little DLC for Uncharted 4 at this point, I don't care. Give it a shot, guys. Like, come on, Naughty Dog. I know you're like stepping away from the Nathan Drake stuff, but like, oh,
I mean, they left it open ended for another Uncharted story and without Nathan Drake, right?
Right. I think if they go down that route, that they would probably just reboot it at this point, which I really don't want to see happen.
I don't either.
But I just, the way the world works, I feel like that's the next step. I think that's why they made the smart decision. They were like, we're not going to touch it for a little while. But I just, oh man, give it another shot. That was so much fun. Like feelings of defeat sometimes when you couldn't quite get on the airplane, but then other times when you did get on the airplane and wipe the other team out and then guard the plane from the team coming back, like some of the most fun times are just in those opening moments. And we saw people complaining about it a lot. There are people that complained about it a lot, but you and I were like big advocates of it because you can see the potential there.
Yeah, I mean, it again, it was just such a unique experience at the time, which was really cool. Mm-hmm. But I agree. It did feel like you and I were the only, I'm sure that's not true. I'm sure there's many other people out there and we just didn't know them or whatever.
Yeah.
But it felt that at the time you and I were the only two people that were like pushing for that to happen.
We've been playing Call of Duty every year.
Like, yeah, exactly. It just made it feel like something different than Call of Duty, even more so than it already was. So that was the legacy on the PS3. There was also the PlayStation Vita game, The Golden Abyss, which I picked up a used Vita several years ago for really cheap, and I got a lot of joy out of it. I still have it. Don't play it that often, but one of the experiences I most wanted as soon as I picked up the Vita, I immediately like seeked out that Uncharted game that only came out on the Vita that neither of us played. So I did get to play that, and I had a lot of fun with it. I believe I let you borrow it, and you just weren't able to enjoy it because of the size of the screen. Or did you actually?
I played it one time over at your house where I played it for like 30 minutes or so, and I could see the fun in it. It just, my eyes are so bad. That little tiny screen for that long, it's too much going on that. I need it like plugged into the big TV, even if I'm still using
I can't believe that they haven't released that, and they probably have, and we just missed it, but I can't believe they haven't released that game on like PS4. Like, why wouldn't they?
Weren't some of the mechanics like designed for the Vita controllers or something?
I mean, there was there was a couple of spots where like you would like use the back pad or touchpad a little bit, but like the PlayStation 4 and I think 5, it has a sensor pad on the front of it. It's only missing the bottom pad, and surely they could find a way to, work that out. Like, even if it was literally just a mechanic where it skipped those segments, it wouldn't be that big of a deal, because most of it was for like balancing when you'd be walking across like a beam and stuff.
That's right.
It was cool, but it wasn't necessary. There was a couple, and I say that now, and now I remember there was also a couple of puzzles where you had to like feel around on like the back of something to like uncover stuff. So like there were a few elements that they would have to rework, but I mean 95+% of that game is ready for download,
I agree, and don't call me Shirley. But yeah, I didn't get to play that one as much as you, so. But
it's a pretty cool story. It was really good. In fact, a lot of people considered it to be one of the better stories in the franchise. I still think 2 is better. But if you get the chance, I mean, if they release that on a way that you can play it on a full screen, like definitely would. In fact, if you still have your PS3, you can sync the Vita to the PS3 and play it that way, I believe.
Oh, nice.
I might be having that backwards. I think maybe it's that you can play PS3 games on your Vita. I don't know if it works both ways.
Not as nice.
But that brings us to our most recent gen, which was the Uncharted 4. This is the first time in the series that, for me personally, and I know a lot of people disagree, but this was the first time that I felt like it was like I still love the game, but I didn't love it as much as the first 3 for whatever reason.
I can slightly agree with that a little bit. And a lot of it, I know for us, was the online stuff. Like,
admittedly, it just was a step down for reasons we already talked about.
And even the co-op stuff online, like I really loved beating the co-op stuff, but like there's that one level, I think it's like level 9, where you're on the pirate ship area, and that boss that comes out that's fully armored on the harder difficulty, and he's so freaking tough to beat. And just like when that guy beats you and you earn all this money and then spend money on upgrades within the level, then when that guy beats you and you lose half your money to be respawned and start the whole map over again, it was so felt so defeated on it. I don't know. It just
Yeah.
the online accomplishments weren't as big as it was in Uncharted 3. And if you remember in Uncharted 3, they had two different kinds of online play outside of, well, three technically. They had the player versus player, but then you had the players versus enemy aspects where you'd have like tasks to complete, and then you had the actual co-op missions. But in Uncharted 4, they kind of looped all that in to you either have the player versus player or the co-op missions that kind of have the P versus E elements in it and within certain tasks in it. And it felt like not as much, honestly.
Yeah. And like in part 3, I mean, I think the thing that we almost mastered, I would say, was the survival, where it would just be 10 waves of enemies that would come at you and get progressively harder. And it got to a point where, again, we just like knew where to be to cover each other and like had so much fun with it. And in part 4, again, I think they made it so like that it's like you could play like a pool of like, it's sometimes survival, or maybe it was like endless survival. They changed it in some manner.
It's like 10 rounds, but each round was a different task you had to complete.
Yes, that's what it was.
If I remember,
and it just
correctly.
wasn't a lot of people love that, but I was not one of those people.
It was still enjoyable. It just
very much
bring the same kind of joy that the third one did.
Yeah, I agree. I also think that to some extent, like the story, I didn't enjoy much because it felt like they like late wrote Sam into the story.
Yeah.
Like it's like, why have we had Nathan Drake, whose most important driving factor in his life has been his brother this entire time, but it took 4 games before we even heard his name.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and like the whole thing of him being like. My thing was starting with 3, they dive into Drake's backstory a little bit where you find out he's basically an orphan.
Mm-hmm.
And then in 4,
and there's like, that's where you learn that like the Drake name isn't actually like it might be made up essentially.
Yeah. Which like, also I was like, oh, that sucks. But then at the same time, the good thing about 3 was that I understand why he took up the moniker though. Like I actually kind of enjoy that reveal that he's not actually a Drake, but that he just kind of owns it anyways. But then in 4, it's like, we've got this extended family we didn't know about, basically.
Right, yeah.
I like
it's like when they write a little kid into a I do too, but it's like when they write a little kid into a sitcom that's been around for a few years because they need to spice it up. Like when you get like Oliver on the Brady Bunch.
Exactly.
Or like that random kid on the Married with Children that just shows up after a while. Yeah,
and then and the other thing with 4 is then they decide to like just have a couple quick cameos by your favorite characters, and then
it's like, yeah, again, TV metaphor, but it's like an old character walks in the bar and everybody's like, "Oh, hey, guy from season 3, good to see you again."
Yeah, and well, as Miles knows, I'm a big Chloe fan, so like any game that doesn't have a lot of Chloe in it, I'm not gonna like as much as the other ones.
The one positive about 4 is it introduced Nadine, and Nadine is an awesome character, a very badass character. And then as you already mentioned, but that opens up the what was the game with Chloe and Nadine? What was that one called?
The Lost Legacy, I believe.
The Lost Legacy, which that one, again, Richie pointed out, it was more of an open world type thing because you basically had multiple temples and you could go and do them in whichever order you wanted. And it wasn't
open world, but they trick you into making it feel like it's open world.
Yeah, that's a better way of putting it. You're absolutely right. It's almost like it's really like a really like updated hub from like the Mario world. Like
it reminded me of like a very scaled down version of like Ocarina of Time.
Okay. Yeah. Very, very good way to put that as well. Again, a fun adventure, but it is lacking the central character of Nathan Drake, who is the star of the franchise by far. He's such a lovable scoundrel, which is what, all the best characters in literature and movies and everything are.
Well, to prove the point, like they had to bring in Sam in Lost Legacy for a little while too, because that like having that just the Drake name in the game, when they talked about Sam and Nate in Lost Legacy, you were like, oh, my heartstrings. Mm-hmm. And then when Sam actually showed up, you almost felt that Drake connection, even though Nate wasn't actually there. Well, I guess Sam is technically a Drake, but still, you get what I'm saying.
Yeah, 100%. Great game franchise across the board. I think that now you can get all 3 of the original games in the Nathan Drake collection, which is, I think, a seal of a deal.
I think they have an Uncharted collection now, too.
Is that? I think that's Uncharted 4 and the Lost Legacy together, right?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, so long story short, if you haven't, for whatever reason, played these games, I would recommend all of them. I guess one might be a little bit after you play the other ones, I think 1 doesn't feel as great control wise because they just add some better elements into it in the sequels. But even if you start at Uncharted 2, I think that you would have a really, really good time playing through them.
See, I feel like you need to play Uncharted 1 because there's so many good characters in that one.
That's fair too. There are a lot of great characters there.
And it shows the beginnings of Nate and Elena and Eddie.
And Nate and Sully.
Yeah, well, they've already got a relationship. You don't see the beginnings of that until Uncharted 3, technically.
You're right.
But if I'm going to nerd out on you for a second. But I like the bad guy Eddie in the first game, who's not the main villain, but like he's like the lovable buffoon of a bad guy.
Mm-hmm.
And I just feel like there's good characters in that. Like, we haven't even really talked about the villains yet. We haven't even talked about the movie, and we've already been talking for like 40 minutes.
Yeah, we're about to get to the movie. Before we move on, I just remembered, I think it's still your Twitter profile picture, but just to like demonstrate how much Richie loves this franchise, he commissioned somebody to paint him in the style of Nathan Drake. And if you're watching and you can see it right now, if you're listening, you'll just have to take my word for it. It's fucking awesome. What's the artist name? Do you remember?
Zach Brown, a friend of mine from high school, which his birthday was either yesterday or the day before. We have like these 3 of us where it was like 21st, 22nd, 23rd on our birthdays.
Oh, that's wild.
So happy late birthday, Zach.
Happy late birthday and great artwork. It's always been a very cool piece of yours that I think is really rad that you had done.
Yeah, that's the only piece of art I've ever commissioned.
Well, at least you're batting 100 or 1,000 or whatever.
My priorities are straight.
1,000's good, and 100 would actually be quite terrible.
We haven't even mentioned like one of the most fun things for me in the Uncharted games is finding the treasures. You see that little glint off in the distance, and you're like, oh, I got to go figure out how to get that. Just a clever little scavenger hunt.
Yeah, and that was another thing that really gave that game great replay value because, like, I think we would. I think we've always had the same kind of measure on this. I would always play it through once on just like normal standard and just like enjoy it for what it is, enjoy the story, have a little bit of like fun killing enemies and whatnot, but not super challenging. But I would always go back and beat it on like the extremely hard difficulty, which is something I rarely do with video games. But this one was actually fun to like challenge yourself in that way, and hard as fuck sometimes. Like some of those gun battles, they made you work for it.
See, I thought you started doing on the third one. I thought you started playing it on hard first.
I might have done that.
We had to beat it on hard to unlock crushing.
And I think you're right.
Go normal, then hard, then crushing.
But I would say the thing that we'd both also do is then there's always that added element of like you could play it through a bunch of times. Sometimes, admittedly, I think we both turn it on easy after a little while because it's just like I just got to find this treasure and I'm tired of people cheating at me. It's like a little hide and seek in every level, and there'd be a list of however many treasures that are in the world that you have to go and find.
The first 3 Uncharted games, I believe, on all 3 of them, I got the platinum trophy from getting everything in the game. The first,
I know I did for 2 and 3. I don't know if I ever did on the first one.
For 4, I started my second playthrough, and I think I was on I played it on normal the first time, so I was on hard the second time. And I think I was on the spot where like you had to get through this giant area without being spotted by any of the enemies.
Oh my god, that one was so hard, dude.
And I got frustrated with that one, and I think I quit. And I was also trying to do my treasure run on that one where I collect all the treasures, and I just never went back and tried to do that one, which kind of speaks to what you're saying about 4 overall in the story, which is again still a fantastically fun game. I lost my drive on that one, and I don't know, some other game must have come out after that, like Spider-Man. I have no idea.
Honestly, I think almost same story, but like I actually do remember grinding through and getting that platinum trophy on the PlayStation 4 because I was so freaking close to doing it. But I think that's what broke me is that level that you just described where you had to go through without even getting seen. Not only like not like killing anybody, but like you couldn't even.
It was the graveyard area.
For me it was one. Was it like hanging off of like a cliffside though?
Yeah, it's like a bunch of tombs, and you go down into one of the tombs, and you come back out, and you gotta jump up.
Oh my god, dude! Again, I think that it almost ruined the fun at a certain point. Like it was just too much. But all in all, great set of games for both single player and multiplayer players, co-op, competitive, individual, whatever. They're all good. And apparently, we're not the only people that agree because they've come out with a movie. We now have an Uncharted movie universe. Funny enough, this movie has been in talks since like 2012. It seems like even on IMDb, I noticed. I'll pull it up in a minute and like read some of them, but like most of the trivia on IMDb is like there's a bunch of stuff that says like here 3 in a row. It's like here Sean Levy was hired to direct the film, but then decided to drop from projects. Travis Knight was attached to direct the film, but later dropped out due to scheduling. Jan Tragenberg was hired to direct, but dropped out due to creative. Neil Berger was originally hired. Like there's like so many of these names.
A lot of rewrites, a lot of recasting.
And it's so much so that when this movie was first being pitched, at one point, Mark Wahlberg was attached to play Nathan Drake, and that fell through. And then obviously he's now played Sully, who's a much older character. So like it goes to show how long that's been in negotiations.
I remember at one point I was talking myself into thinking Wahlberg could pull off Drake, and that's how upset I was. Where I was like, I really don't want to. Because I'm like how most of the fans were back in the day, 12 years ago, or almost 12 years ago, 10 years ago now. I wanted Nathan Fillion. He was the clear choice. There was nobody else unless you had Nolan North himself do it, which honestly he might have been able to do it. But Nathan Fillion was the one we all wanted him. They had
Nathan Fillion was the one for sure. But again, that was also a decade ago.
Oh yeah, he's much older now. I don't think he could keep up with all that stuff now. But the fan-made film that they released a few years ago with him as Drake, where it was a little cheesy, but like he had the sarcasm and like the guns and everything down, that little fan-made film that was 8 to 12 minutes. It's fantastic.
Non-canon, but it's available on YouTube and it's fun as hell.
If you're a fan of the games, you'll enjoy it.
Yeah, agreed.
But yeah, after all the recasts and director changes and creative differences and script rewrites, I was very nervous about this movie.
I was very nervous about this movie as well. I like Tom Holland a lot, but we talked quite a bit about the fact that he played Spider-Man just a few months ago, which actually it's funny. I learned while reading some trivia today, Tom Holland actually finished shooting Uncharted and then 3 days later was on set for Spider-Man. So it was like,
that's why he wants to take a break for acting.
He's been on 2 huge franchises back to back. And, Uncharted went into hell, development hell for so long that they basically let a new giant pain in the ass enter the world of COVID-19. And then this whole thing with a lot of people were actually worried that the Uncharted movie was just cursed because after 1 day of shooting the film, they had to take a break because somebody got COVID. And Antonio Banderas at one point had to be offset for 30 days because he got COVID. There was all sorts of just stuff that they had to deal with that made the production of this movie even longer and longer and longer. But as nervous as I was, as cheesy as it could have been, as just disrespectful to the character and the franchise as it might have been, it wasn't. I liked it. I thought it was a fun movie.
I did something terrible and looked up the reviews on IMDb before we went to see it, and I think it was around a 6.2 or 6.7. And I was like, that's not bad. That's summer blockbuster numbers right there. Mm-hmm. But that in my mind, I'm like, it always goes down from that. That's the starting point. It always goes down from there. I'd seen a few people on Facebook say that they enjoyed it, and I was like, yeah, we'll see what happens. And then after, I wasn't I was still excited to see it, but not I think you were very, very excited to see it, and I was hesitantly excited to see it, if that makes sense. I was worried about all of it. I was worried that Tom Holland was just going to be Spider-Man, but doing Uncharted type things.
Yeah, it's just a good guy who's sarcastic while he's fighting his bad guys. It could have been too similar.
I remember reading an article a few weeks back or a few months back where they were talking. I told Miles about this yesterday, where they were talking about, is Tom Holland an A-list actor that's bankable on other projects that aren't Spider-Man related? And they were like, Uncharted is the stick, the point at which we're going to see which way his career is going to go, which is a lot of pressure to put on a young man. But there's some truth there though. Is he bankable on stuff that's not Spider-Man? And it worked. I feel like it works. he does seem very, very young in some of the scenes, especially him and Antonio Banderas are talking about collectibles, and he's like, I dabble, and he's kind of
It's like, dude, you look like you're 12 next to him right now.
But they lean into it though a little bit.
Yeah.
Where, like, even Antonio Banderas, you can tell he doesn't give a crap what he says. He's like, whatever, kid.
Yeah.
But I felt like he worked as a young Drake. He wasn't Peter Parker. Like Miles and I, for the first time ever, I think, talked about all of our feelings on an item that we're going to be reviewing. Usually we're like, save it for the podcast.
Save it for the podcast.
We wanted to talk about it, but like they show him as a scoundrel a little bit. Like he's stealing stuff from people. Like he's trying to trick people around. He's being tricked. They really dive you into the world.
Yeah, agreed 100%. Funny enough, I like Tom Holland as a young Nathan Drake. I did not like the kid they got for young Nathan Drake in this movie. And I
didn't like that whole scene.
Yeah, there was just something about that whole thing. I mean, I understand they're trying to really set it up, to give him that that draw to be able to be manipulated into that bigger world or whatever, because he wouldn't do it for the gold, but he'd do it for his brother. They set it up eventually where we know his brother is going to be around for apparently the sequels that they're already planning on making, which hopefully we don't get an Amazing Spider-Man situation here. Where they just leave you with all these loose ends that they never get to go and finish up. Who are they looking at the end, Richie? But we'll get to that here in a little bit as well. A couple of things that worked for me more than I expected them to as well was Mark Wahlberg as Sully. He did a great job. I thought that he was again, a younger Sully than what we're used to seeing, but still, it was great. And honestly, that end sequence where he comes out with the mustache, he looks just like Sully did in the young Sully scenes from Part 3.
I'm really glad, because I never in a million years would have expected him to actually do the mustache. When you heard he was going to play Sully, you were like, we're never going to see Sully, right? And, they even throw the cigar to him at the end of the movie.
Yes, and pops it. Yeah, that's so good.
It might be fan service, but we're fans and we want to be.
That's what we're liking here. Yeah. And the other one, and this I'm very curious to hear more of your thoughts. I know we talked a little bit about it, but the person that they had that played Chloe, when I saw her in the previews, I'm not gonna lie, I was just like, she doesn't really feel like Chloe to me. But her name is Sophia Ali. She did a great job as Chloe Fraser, in my opinion.
That was the thing I was most scared about, because Chloe's probably my favorite Uncharted character, maybe besides Nate. It goes back and forth, but Chloe's such a strong character, and there's so many elements to what has happened to her in her life and how she goes about herself. And let's be honest, she's freaking hot too in the games. But I think she's just such an interesting character all around. And I was like you, when I saw the previews, I was like, oh man, I don't know, but I've never heard of this actress before. I don't know about her. Maybe it's okay because she's an unknown, but just from the small stuff they showed on the previews, I was like, that doesn't seem like Chloe. But when you actually get into the movie and things get going, I feel like they did a good job of bringing some of those elements of her character out. And by the end of the movie, I was like, man, I hope they bring her back. She did a really good job.
100% agreed. I look forward to seeing her in the future. I look forward to when they do eventually introduce Nate's wife. Well, he meets her as a camera woman, a documentarian, but Ella, am I blanking? As Ella or Ellie? Elena, thank you. Elena, is Nate's main squeeze, but definitely Chloe and him have some history, as we learn in the game. So I look forward to seeing more from her. I liked a lot of the scenes with her. I love the heaven and hell scene where her and Nate were in the basement together. They end up in that bar. They end up in that trap. That's where it gets to where Sully is in a Papa John's. And when I first saw the Papa John's, it's obvious product placement, and I was kind of annoyed by it. But it's another thing that they lean into so much that it made me like it, like we talked about with Subway earlier. Because at one point, Sully is trying to track them. They're underground, and he's up above ground, and he's trying to track them. And they're in an emergency, essentially, where something bad's going to happen, and Sully doesn't hurry. And he's like, I don't know what you want from me. I'm in a freaking Papa John's right now.
Yeah, that was quite fun there. Most of the movie was quite fun. And the thing that I was worried about, and I still feel like they've got to round it out more, but for a technically prequel story scenario. It's the Nate and Sully relationship. Like that they didn't just have Nate jump into the adventure. Like I like it when movies do that, where at first he's like, "No, I'm not going to do this. Like I don't even know who you are and whatever." Because the beginning of the movie, it started feeling very rushed to me. Like they were setting stuff up so fast and things were just falling accordingly the way they needed to. But then Nate's like, "No, I don't know who you are, dude. I'm not going to go with you." And then they do that
and
slow
Sully
burn.
was proven not trustworthy a lot throughout the film. Like even the like last big moment where Sully basically chooses Nate over Fortune. Like you and I both talked about like how like I legitimately thought he was going to keep the gold and like still try to save him, but like not like not make the sacrifice that he ends up making.
Yeah, they did a good job on that. Wahlberg did a good job on that, but like I liked their relationship. They bounced off of each other very, very well in the movie. But I know, Nate and Sully over the years will become a lot closer than that, and it'll be more loving. But like even the scene where Tom Holland tried to hand him the last piece of bubble gum at the end, it was a really sweet moment. But you saw it coming. You saw that look in his eye, and hell, he's about to throw that out the window.
Yep, it's a sweet moment, but also very that's kind of similar to in the scene we hated in the orphanage. His Sam gives him a piece of gum and he's like, "Hey, that's my last one. Split it with me." And Nate pops the whole thing in his mouth and just puts that shit on his mouth. Yeah, it's a very similar vibe. Like it's a brotherly love. Or maybe in Sully and in Nate's case, it's maybe less brotherly and more like uncle, nephew, parental of some sort, or older sibling. I don't know. Regardless, there's definitely a familial bond that forms amongst those two, and we start to see a little bit of that at the end with the teaser for the next movie, where they've clearly aged up a little bit, and Sully started smoking cigars and all that fun stuff. And that actually makes me think too, we've talked a lot about how great they did with the acting on this. The writing was okay. There was parts of it that, they did a good job of trying to make it feel like the video game. And I think they did it in a positive way most of the time.
All the parkour fighting, like we talked,
fighting was fantastic.
It was so much fun.
But the other people that I think really deserve a shout out or like did a fantastic job would be like the set designers and the costume people costume designers. Cause man, like some of the looks that the characters had in this movie were straight out of the video game. And it was really, really well done. Like we talked, like when Nate puts on his gun holsters for the first time, that looks so badass. The t-shirt even at the end where it's like the opening of 3, I think. All of that was so Chloe's look, all of that was so well done. And then they had a ton of Easter eggs, some big, some small. The most notable was you got Nolan North as one of the vacationers at the resort that they accidentally swim up on. And I love that, like when they explain themselves, they're like, "Oh yeah, we just fell out of an airplane," and he's like, "Oh, something like that happened to me once."
And then he's like, "What a weird guy."
Yeah. And then more subtle things, like when they open up Nate's trunk at one point, there's a Naughty Dog symbol, which of course Naughty Dog is the studio, as we said, that brought this movie to us. So I guess that's all fan service too. But man, do I love being serviced.
I mean, those Marvel movies do so well because of all the replayability where you see stuff in the background. So it's okay to do that kind of stuff. And I'm going to tell everybody right now what I told Miles after the movie finished yesterday is that I'm kind of upset with Tom Holland because like 10 years ago, Richie, or 12 years ago, Richie, he would have said the two properties, if I was ever to become an actor, which at one point I was like strongly trying to be one, I would want to play Spider-Man and then later in life, Nathan Drake. And this punk kid has done both of those things before his career even like really took off. And no, I'm just kidding about punk kid, but like I am vicariously living. I'm vicarious. I'm not the one that on that one podcast we did that didn't like him. That was whoever that other person was. But I am living vicariously through Tom Holland right now for the rest of his life. I feel like so. Yeah. Good job, young man. You have made me happy.
Yeah, no, he's quite literally living the dream, and
we're seeing his acting chops in the last two stuff. Like again, No Way Home. Like man.
Yeah, no, he's not just a kid in a suit. He is an actor, and he's proven it. Except he's taking a break, which is almost a bummer. But I hope he's taking a break just long enough for them to work out the script for Uncharted 2. Because I'm going to be in theaters to see it. I'm sure you will be as well.
Do you keep forgetting that he is British? So like, He's doing
That's the mark of a good. That's a mark of a good actor. Yeah, that's like I always love this story from oh my god, Christian Bale when he was on Batman Begins. He never broke his American accent for the entire film, but then at the rap party, he was speaking in his natural accent. And like people are like, "Oh, are you preparing as like a British person for an upcoming role?" And he's like, "I am a British person, you twat."
That sounds like something he would say.
Yeah, I don't know if that's the exact quote, but it's close enough. But I think we pretty well covered the Uncharted franchise. Richie, I know you have more to say, but yeah, what do you want to talk about?
We still have two things: favorite villain, favorite game.
Oh yeah, for sure. I actually was going to say just most memorable moment from the game was going to be my question to you, but that might have similar answers. Favorite villain and favorite game was your question. Mine's going to be Uncharted 2, and it's going to be the final boss fight from Uncharted 2, Lazarevic, when he's all like, yeah, there you go. When he's all like roided out with that like blue like goo from the magic tree.
Mm-hmm. Which it sounds like Miles is on something when he's playing the game, but no, that's pretty damn spot on how it goes. So Lazarevic is your favorite?
That dude, I still remember, like, I don't know if my heart has ever pounded more during a boss fight than that boss fight. Like, it was to the point, like, I never feel it. Like, the only time in video game history I can think where I'm like, I need a break, like, now. Like, I cannot do is, like, one time they made me kill a dog on the Walking Dead game, and I just couldn't handle it. And I legit just had to turn off my game for a bit and like go like watch some like Disney where no animals died, which is harder to find than you'd think.
Yeah.
But
don't watch Bambi.
Yeah. And then the other one, it wasn't like a hard break, but I remember after dying a few times on that, because I mean he is like chasing you and he's like yelling, like you can hear him. And he's screaming at you, and you have very limited resources. And you're just like basically dodging and rolling and dodging and jumping and rolling and like just running for your life for this entire sequence. And I remember, I think I like lost to him twice, and my heart was just like going through the like my chest, and I had to like go like take like a $5 on that one and just like smoke a bowl, like get a drink, and like just like woo-saw it out for a minute until I could go back and give it another try, because it was such an intense fight.
That's such a great review of that. I never realized like how I remember you talking about how you take a break, but I don't realize how intense it got to you, which is the sign that it was a good moment and that like they did a good job with that scene. For me, like I love characters like Harry Flynn, even in 3, Talbot, like the guy who ends up being the last boss fight, even though he's not projected to be that through the whole game. Like they're very like cool in different ways, and you don't like them and you want to kick the crap out of them, but it's you can't beat Lazarevic. Lazarevic is just this big ball of rage that has.
I'll give honorary mention to the sword fight at the end of 4 too. Actually, as much as I shat on that game, I love that sword fight ending. I thought that was perfect.
That was a tough fight
on the pirate ship. It was a tough fight.
That was a tough fight. But Lazarevic is just—he's so menacing. Like he's incredible as a villain. And you already know, for me, like my favorite scene out of all Uncharted games is the freaking train sequence. Like, and my favorite opening to any game ever is Uncharted 2, because you start off hanging off a train, and then when they come back to that point in the game and you're getting on the train, you're like, and when you get shot, you're like, oh crap, this is the beginning of the game, and you have to redo the first parts of it, and like the whole train sequence is just so like heart racing the whole time, and you're going one train car at a time, and it's just and the betrayal by Chloe right there for a second, but like you just like in the movie, you kind of understand she was in a tough spot there. It was just so much fun. And there's great moments in all the Uncharted games. Like there's heart pounding moments in all the games. The plane sequence.
There's something we didn't really mention very well, or maybe we did. And every game is known for having like these incredible set pieces. Yeah.
Yeah, but just the train sequence in 2, like if they do an Uncharted sequel in the movies, I hope that they pay a little more homage to that part, which I'm sure they will. And I know we talked about in length that we wish they hadn't spoiled so much of the plane sequence from the movie in the trailers.
You know what? I am going to rant about that for a second. I hated the previews for this movie so much. I know it's common nowadays and it makes money or whatever, but I feel like this movie in particular was so guilty of spoiling so much of what it had to offer. Because if you didn't get it spoiled in preview 1, you got it spoiled in preview 2. I hated that I knew that the plane sequence and the ship like helicopter sequence was going to happen before I ever saw the movie. And frankly, I just got to the point, and probably because it had been pushed back so many times for so many reasons. Like, this is one of those times where I remember sitting in a theater, I think it was like watching Jackass a month ago, and just thinking to myself, like, oh my God, I hope I don't have to watch another Uncharted preview. Because like it's a movie I'm actively excited to see that I'm sick and tired of hearing about.
Mm-hmm. You don't want anything spoiled. And like, I didn't know about the flying pirate ship part, so I was really happy with that set piece. I thought that was a lot of fun.
But see, like, and I like literally the whole time they're in like the pirate ship when it's grounded, I'm just like, well, I'm ready for them to pick them up with a helicopter because I know that's what's about to happen. So nothing's really going to happen until that does.
You know, and the plane sequence would have been so much more enjoyable if you didn't kind of know how it was already going to play out from all the previews.
Yeah. And I mean, like, you could make the argument that like that you knew from the game, but like literally you even knew that he was going to get hit by a car at the end. Like, not only did you know that he was going to make it all the way back up, then he's going to get hit by a car and be falling again. It's just like, yeah, they really spoiled the shit out of that whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
But that's a complaint about how movies are marketed in general, not really specific to this movie.
Yeah, it wasn't them that decided to do it, or maybe it was. Who knows?
Yeah, either way. But
what a somber note to end on.
I think that pretty well covers the Uncharted franchise, other than the fact that, yes, we love the hell out of it. Richie, is there anything else that you want to say about Uncharted?
I couldn't find my replica ring. I have a replica of the Sic Parvis Magna, or how I fucked it up. The Greatness from Small Beginnings ring. I have a replica from that because I bought the collector's edition when 3 came out, which came with the Nathan Drake action figure and a belt buckle and some other stuff, but I couldn't find them in my boxes. I still have stuff I haven't unpacked here, but I definitely wanted to show off the picture. Thank you again, Zach Brown. What an artist, what a friend. But I just wanted to say, like, I think Uncharted 2, I've said this to Miles numerous times, for even as short as it is, Uncharted 2 might be my favorite video game of all time, which is saying a lot because
hard thing to argue against. It's a good choice.
I'm an RPG fanatic, like stuff like Final Fantasy VII I live for, and that's up there. But Uncharted 2 might, just from the all around, every part of it's enjoyable. Like, might be the best game of all time for me.
I think I would pick something on an older system if I'm being honest, but in terms of a video game experience, it's one of the best I can recommend for sure. But that's going to do it for this Best Darn Everything, which was a real love fest for Uncharted today, but I'm okay with it. We are going to be back with more of these in the future, but next week we are getting back to the basics with another Best Darn Diddly review of Season 12's Tennis the Menace.
You can follow Miles at Mr. Most Days Off. You can follow me at TheWiz_Kid23. You can follow our show at Best Darn Diddly. That's DIDDLY. And you said we have to record next week, Miles?
I did.
Crap.
And until next time, be cromulent to each other.